All right. It is May 23rd, 2024 at the time of this recording. So welcome everybody to the GoatCast podcast. I am Big Nige. I will be hosting the show today, joined of course by the ballest and the tallest CW. How are we doing today, CW?
We're good. It's almost a weekend, long weekend, Memorial Day. So counting down the hours.
As you should. And we have a very special treat for y'all today. We have a Hall of Fame topic discussion where we definitely going to be debating some questionable figures coming up. So
Hmm.
the reason why we're going through this is I was watching Shaq's podcast and he had Draymond Green on this time. And if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you guys to go check it out. Um, and a few people were mentioned in that podcast, more specifically Rudy Gobert. Shaq had asked Draymond, what do you think about this year's Defensive Player of the Year? Because this was like a day or so after we had witnessed Joker dominate Gobert pretty much throughout that entire series, by the way. And Shaq made the funny comment about Rudy Gobert was Serbian barbecue chicken to the Joker because anytime he was switched on him, he was eating him alive. Um, and Draymond responded, "Well, this was the first year that he had mentioned that Rudy Gobert actually deserved. This is his fourth Defensive Player of the Year now,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously guys can't truly pick on him. I don't technically agree with that with Draymond, but he's saying that you can't pick on him like you used to could pick on him because he's moving his feet more, he's being more active on screens, he's blocking more shots, et cetera, et cetera. Do
Mm-hmm.
I do I agree with that? I don't know, but it did lead to a very interesting topic as we've seen through these playoffs, guys like LeBron, KD, Steph, guys who are getting older into the league, those guys are home now. They're being usurped by the Lucas, the Shays, the Anthony Edwards, and of course Jason Tatum's, and now the Pacers with
Fishing.
Halliburton. Yes, they've sent those old heads have gone fishing. So then it kind of posed me to ask the question, so with the older generation getting pushed out, which some of these guys that are where do they fall in the Hall of Fame? And we're not going to speak about the NBA's week. Everybody gets in Hall of Fame that takes your college career, overseas career, the little bit of good things you do in the NBA, and it's like, oh, yep, he's a Hall of Famer. Like, I think we need to get away from that. So me and CW today are going to be kind of breaking down kind of what we believe players should be in the Hall of Fame. Obviously, we can't give a concrete criteria for the Hall of Fame because a lot of players on this list they contribute the game in many different ways. So we can't judge each player the same. However, we can't give certain players a pass either. And I'll definitely get into that as we get through the video. But I'm gonna go ahead and bring the man of the hour, Rudy Gobert. Now, Rudy Gobert, four-time Defensive Player of the Year. Obviously, there's more accolades for him, but he's mainly a defensive-minded big man. He
Mm-hmm.
gets picked on a lot, and he doesn't have the best hands. He doesn't move that very well, and you just kind of watch him sometimes, especially in these playoffs, where you're just sitting there scratching your head like, this guy's 7-1. Is this guy really the Defensive Player of the Year, or am I just missing something? Because it seems like every team goes after him. He doesn't really alter shots like you would want a Defensive Player of the Year to, like a Wimby, where he's stopping whole fast breaks by just standing there. Um, but I'm gonna pose the question to CW first. Obviously he's got more time to continue to build his resume, but as currently constructed, do you have Rudy Gobert in the Hall of Fame?
All right. Do I have Rudy Gobert in the Hall of Fame? You know what? I do. Um,
Oh,
he's going to get in based on his merits, and that's kind of the weakness of the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame is they look at certain criteria and they will give you a benefit of the doubt kind of thing because I love Ben Wallace. He did great things with Detroit. He was multiple time defensive player of the year, got a ring, but is he a Hall of Famer? Like, was he that good of a defender that you could say he's top of the pop? He's one of the best of the best. I don't think so. So I see Rudy Gobert in that same kind of vein where he's Ben Wallace-like, where he's going to alter shots in a certain way. He's going to be a solid team defender. He can defend. If somebody's coming in, he can help defend. Kind of like an Anthony Davis, Giannis, those type of guys. If he's got a chance to win a ring this year. They're still very much in the playoffs. So if he gets that ring, I think it's a no-brainer. If he wins that in the same year he won his fourth Defensive Player of the Year, there's no way they're going to overlook that and be like, no, he's not a Hall of Famer. So he'll if he does that, he's definitely in. But either way, I think because he's one of the guys that has the most Defensive Players of the Year, he's going to get in based on just that because he's been a solid defender throughout his career. Whether that's led to winning and accolades and achievements other than just his Defensive Player of the Year, they'll most likely overlook that. But yeah, he'll get in. Even though if it's me, I would say yes, because it's not easy to win that award. Even now, when we say that defense is not what it used to be, it's not easy to win that award. And they could have easily given that to Wemby. They probably should have. But the fact that they didn't, and more people chose him, and you got to look at it through that lens that he won it, 4 of them is a big time. If you win 4 MVPs, that means a lot. Even though maybe somebody else deserved it, that means a lot. So 4 Defensive Player of the Years is a high metric, high mark. So, yeah, I say Rudy Gobert will probably get into the Hall of Fame.
I think I'm going to have a hot take. I think Rudy Gobert is the worst Defensive Player of the Year recipient. I think the amount of times he won it is overrated. I definitely think the Defensive Player of the Year should have gone to Wemby. Had they won 20 more games or so, I think he would have won the Defensive Player of the Year.
With you there.
There's been some questionable times that Rudy Gobert has won the Defensive Player of the Year in his career, albeit you can say that about a lot of people. But for me personally, I just don't think he's that impactful as a defender, because how many times have we seen Rudy Gobert get played off of the floor in pivotal playoff games? Like key games where they need him to play big. They need him for his rim protection. His Defensive Player of the Year presence. Teams were exploiting him, like a series where the Jazz played the Clippers. He got played off the court. He was one of not the only reason, but he was a big reason. His presence on the floor hindered that team, because I don't know, whatever scheme they're running where he was in drop coverage every 2 seconds, or he was supposed to guard the corner and he's trying to roam and protect the paint. And I don't know if you blame it on bad guards or miscommunication, but his man was always open. Why? I don't know. I really don't. I don't know, but I don't think he has the level of impact, like you said, a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year should have. When have we seen him do it at the highest level? Now, I get what you're saying about this year. This is probably his deepest playoff run, getting to the Western Conference Finals, especially with a team of this caliber in the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think this is the best team he's been on as a collective unit, and definitely one of the biggest teams for sure. But when you just look, he has some good stats. 14 points. He averages 12 points for his career, 12 rebounds. That's cool. Those aren't numbers to scoff at. This is still against NBA level talent. Yeah. But if we're talking about the NBA, everybody gets in Hall of Fame. Yeah, sure, he's probably going to make it. But in my humble opinion, I emphatically disagree. I don't think he's that good of a basketball player, period. He struggles to score on people a foot shorter than him with any kind of size on them. He looks like he doesn't even know what he's doing out there half the time. Like if it's not a drop off pass where he dunks the ball, have we even seen him create for himself ever as a 7'1" big
He
man?
hit that dirt one-legged shot against Denver the other night.
Okay. Like that was a luck shot, and once he hit that shot, even you said the game was over because if him of all people to hit a shot like that,
I sure did.
You know something was off. But I just don't think he's that impactful, and obviously like yes, he alters shots, but at some point in the playoffs, where does his rim protection shine? Where do they look for him to get a stop? And he actually delivers. I don't have any, argument for that. I don't. And when we talk about yeah, he has some accolades to back up his claim for the Hall of Fame, but if we're talking about impact on the highest level, I just don't see it. I see, like you said, as a help defender, for sure, he's very good at what he does. But for me, if defense is your calling card, as a big man, and you have the MVP going against you, and he is going at you, and you can't even stop him. Like that to me hurts his case because it's like we are putting the best defender in the world on the MVP, the 3-time MVP, Nikola Jokic, and you can't do anything to stop it. And for me, that's a problem. I think that hurts his case as a defensive player of the year. 4-time, 5-time, you can give him 6 defensive player of the years. It don't matter because nobody's intimidated by his rim protection. And unless you're like a 6-foot guard, maybe. But all the people his size and maybe a little shorter than him, they do not fear him. They go right through his chest, and it's like he's not even there. So if defense is the reason he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, that's where I disagree. And
even if they win a championship,
even if they win the championship, I mean, I might have a lesser argument than what I have right now because he would, but he's still not his rim protection is not the reason they're going to win. Like they're going to win because of their immense ball pressure. Obviously, he helps them on the boards. Like, yes, he's a pretty solid rebounder for his size, but we're not going to act like he's not one of the biggest guys on the court and he can't even score 2 feet from the basket. People just foul him, and he has no chance of getting the ball up over his head. He keeps the ball down here, so people just grab at his wrist, and he's going to the free throw line. Like if you're if you're a Hall of Fame level big man, there's no reason somebody 6'5" should be guarding you and actually being able to contain you. You are not a Hall of Fame center. There's no way. I know that there's some past centers who probably couldn't do half of what Rudy Gobert could do. I hear you, right? And I never watched him with my own 2 eyes. But to sit here and act like he's a Hall of Fame level center, I'm not ready to give him that title because what has he been able to do offensively, not just defensively? Because yes, we understand he's a defensive player. Where have we seen his game elevate from the day he walked into the NBA to where it is now? Like defensively, I'll give you that. He's been a better defender pretty much throughout his career. I mean, I'd say a little stagnant at times, but he's tricked upwards in that. But offensively, I've never seen him get any better as an offensive player.
I want to disagree with you slightly, but at the same time, I'm thinking, what about what about Ben Wallace? I mean, he is a Hall of Famer, and he didn't stop Shaq, just like Rudy Gobert couldn't stop Jokic.
But his teammate could. His teammate.
I mean, his teammate technically stopped. I mean,
Towns
Jokic had 30-something points. He had 40 points, the other game,
but he scored most of his points on Gobert or Naz Reid. But we're not going to act like Towns was the best defender on him. You can even look at the numbers. He held him to
he did
under 40% in that playoffs.
But what I'm saying is, if Rudy Gobert goes on to win a championship, is that not the equivalent of what Ben Wallace did with the 2004 Detroit Pistons? Because he didn't stop Shaq. Shaq he wasn't an MVP, but he was an unstoppable force at that time, obviously. So, do you penalize Rudy Gobert because he couldn't stop? And of course, we have to see what Jokic will be going forward. If he's top 5, top 3 center of all time, you can't be like, well, he couldn't stop him. Cat, of course, brings a different, type of coverage on him. But we're not going to look back on it and be like, well, Rudy Gobert couldn't stop one of the greatest centers of all time.
But his teammate could. Like,
did he? And
that even hurt his
really
case more because
him. That's
Towns is not. We know Towns is basically a non-defender. Like, he's been a very, very good defender this year, right? But he has the stigma of being a very lazy and very bad defender, right? So we take him into this team. You're saying that Towns is the best defender for Jokic when you have the defensive player of the year right on your team. So, you tell me that doesn't hurt Gobert's case?
But just maybe Jokic is a bad matchup. I mean, even defensive players of the year have bad matchups. Jordan had, smaller guards gave Jordan lots of trouble. So do we say he wasn't, as great as he was because Rod Strickland and these other guys could score on him easily?
No, because
there's going to be bad matchups for you. And Jokic, as we've seen, was a bad matchup for Gobert. So in the end, do you penalize him for that and say, no, you're not a Hall of Fame worthy player because you couldn't stop this all-time center from scoring, but your teammate could? Yes. And I'm going to use Michael Jordan again.
But Michael Jordan he's both. Like, he was basically the Bulls' like offensive system.
I understand. Yeah, I mean,
so it's like, yeah, you can't expect him to stop everybody and then give you 40 on the other.
That's not the right person to put. But I'm saying, even in, with that, there were times where Pippen had to guard certain players because they gave Jordan so much trouble. But do you penalize Gobert for that when he's already shown to be a 4-time defensive player of the year, even though he couldn't stop this person? And if they end up being the champions this year, do you penalize him? Does that not boost him a little bit in your book to become Hall of Fame ready? You said you like winning. If they win a championship, it might not be on his back, but he was a prime contributor of them getting into a position to get in the playoffs, to get the matchups that they needed to get to go further. He contributed in these playoff games, maybe not the best, but he was able to do things to help out. Like I said, he went Dirk Nowitzki against Denver in that one game, and he's a champion. He's got a ring. So, are you going to put that against him going forward? If he wins a ring, are you going to put all that other stuff against him and say, no, he's not Hall of Fame ready because he didn't do these certain things?
What I'll say, I'll end with this: if they go on to win the chip, I think that helps his argument, but I still don't give him a pass because the guy who's dominating him is literally the same position as him, right? And if you're saying that his teammate, who he wasn't even in discussion for Defensive Player of the Year, can guard him better than you, I have a problem with that. If he's in the same position as you, it's not like Jokic is a point guard or a shooting guard who has all these advantages. Like, he just lowered his shoulder and went right over the top. Now, if you can't stop that as a Defensive Player of the Year center, who you are known for altering shots, his nickname is Stifle Tower, for goodness sakes. And you can't do nothing to derail Jokic, make him work even a little bit harder. Like, no. Like, for me, no, I can't allow that. And that, even if they were to win a championship, he would need to do something else to mitigate what I've seen, because that guy that's busting your what is the same position as you, and you have more advantages in terms of athletic ability than he does, and he's still giving it to you. So that's just my opinion.
Okay, that's
So the
fair.
next guy we have, you guys want anything else to go?
Oh, no, no, that's fair.
Okay.
That's
The
fair.
next guy we have is Kyle Lowry. What are your thoughts on Kyle Lowry? I mean, he is the champion, of course. We've
Mm,
seen him kind of, grow before our eyes,
yeah.
starting in Toronto, and kind of help build that city up with DeMar DeRozan. Obviously, they had some very questionable playoff performances together as
Oh
a
yeah.
duo, but he did ultimately capture a championship with Kawhi Leonard. He was a pivotal part of that championship run, and he would later go on and play with the Miami Heat and contribute with them. And he's currently on the Sixers, and obviously they went home in the first round. But he's just known for playing hellacious defense, hitting some big shots, and of course those memes that I won't put out here, but y'all know what I'm talking about. Is he a Hall of Famer?
Is he a Hall of Famer? You know what? No.
Hmm.
I I want to because he was actually 10th in MVP voting, and I forgot what year it was. 2015. No,
Yeah,
2016.
2015, yeah, 2015, 2016, because I think he
Yeah.
was he was all
So
NBA.
he's been solid. Does have a championship. Um, does have multiple All Stars. Um, he's an undersized guard who plays solid defense and has for most of his career. Smart guy, smart player, but my thing is, I don't think he is. But when I think about it, you look at a Chauncey Billups who's in it. They almost kind of, I'm not say they mirror each other. They mirror each other in a different way because Chauncey was more offensive minded, where Kyle Lowry is more defensive minded. But they're both solid leaders. They're both guys that can, you know, lead guys to where they need to go on the court. They're good team players. So with that, you kind of say yes, but I just don't think Kyle Lowry has done enough in his career to get there. He probably will, but for me, I don't think he's done enough. The accolades just don't add up. Um, even with the All Star selections, the placing 10 in the MVP race, the one championship, he's never been the guy. And even when he's gone to these different teams, he's only been gone to those different teams for kind of his leadership, which is admirable, but not necessarily for his play. Um, and that's why I say no. He's not a Hall of Famer.
I definitely concur with that statement. I do not believe Kyle Lowry at this point or at any point of his career will be a Hall of Famer. I because I remember we had talked about this previously, but we have guys like Steve Nash in the Hall of Fame. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just looking at that name alone, does Kyle Lowry even come into the same sentence as Steve Nash?
Unfortunately, no. And they play the same position pretty much.
Chauncey
So
Billups?
I mean, no, because
So I mean,
Chauncey
that's
was he was a big time shooter. You could count on him for certain stuff.
and Kyle Lowry has had a notorious playoff career where he just fades away.
Yeah.
He's just not when you need him the most. He's just not there sometimes. And to his credit, he has showed up in some big games, especially in
Yeah.
that 2019 run for the Raptors. But there were some games where he just did not show up. And if you're a Hall of Fame level point guard, you can't get there and not show up. It's one thing if you don't get there and you don't have a chance to show up, and you can have the argument, is that person a Hall of Famer or not, whatever the case may be. But you got to the highest level. In terms of impact, I don't see his impact being Hall of Fame like caliber. He's a very respectable player and he's had a very solid career. But his impact, you could see a dozen Kyle Lowrys before you even get a chance to see another Steve Nash.
That's true.
And obviously, we talk about the accolades, 6-time All-Star. He was All NBA one time. He was a champion. To me, that resume is just too small. Just like you said, there's not much else for me to really say other than he's not a Hall of Famer, but a very solid point guard.
Yeah. I mean, if he had a solid two guy, DeMar DeRozan just at that stage of his career was never going to be that. He was frightened of LeBron. But yeah, if he had that two guy that kind of boosted him where he could kind of play off of that guy.
Like Kawhi.
If he had Kawhi for multiple seasons, it might make his case a little better, but nah.
All right, coming up next on the list of next aging old heads, we got the Godfather Al Horford, who's got you in contention for one of the baldest people in the world.
He's younger than me.
So is the Godfather Al Horford, who's currently playing, and like we mentioned in the previous video, just got done giving the business to the Cleveland Cavaliers in a Game 5. And obviously, they just got done playing Game 1 a couple of days ago against the Pacers, and he showed his age out there, but I'm not going to vilify him right now. As he stands currently, is he a Hall of Famer?
I like Al. Even with the championship this year, no. Unfortunately, no. I know people will say, well, what about Vince Carter and these other guys? Vince's reach, and I know you say you want to take out college and all that stuff, but his reach was beyond just the NBA. His reach went to the global game, the Olympics, FIBA, that type of stuff. So Vince got in probably on the totality of his career. Where Al Horford, I mean, he's got, I believe he has All NBA. He's had All Stars. He's been a solid player for most of his career, almost all of his career. And even in the twilight of his career, he changed his game up, started shooting the 3-ball, and, figured out a way to stay relevant. But does that make him not an all-star, but a Hall of Famer? No. He's a solid guy, and even internationally, he doesn't have, that credibility to be a Hall of Famer. And I like him. I hope maybe he can get one because he's a guy that's going to give you maximum effort, but maximum effort doesn't equate to being a Hall of Famer. That's supposed to be the best of the best, and he's not one of those.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. I guess hopefully he gets some bling on his finger. I think he's one of the most hardworking and well-deserved likable guys in the NBA. He's also one of those guys where if you talk smack to him, he's definitely going to try to give it back to you on the other end with a slam dunk or a big shot in your face. So
he's scared of you.
So you know what?
I was saying he's not scared of you. He's going to come at you.
Unless you're LeBron James, then you might back down from that challenge. But moving on to another center who, like you mentioned, Al Horford kind of changed his game to fit the modern era basketball. Brook Lopez came into this league 08-09. He was in the all-rookie. He was an all-rookie team, 2-time all-defensive. He's a 2021 NBA champ, 1-time all-star. He came into this league with the Brooklyn Nets, or I guess the New Jersey Nets, or whatever you want to call it, but came in with the Nets, and he was a big, double-double guy, back to the basket type big, kind of old-school style big. I know guys like Shaq respected his game for that, and when the NBA transitioned to, a whole bunch of the big men shooting threes and kind of playing outside in instead of inside out, he was one of those guys like Al Horford that, changed his game up to stay relevant, stay, active in the league, with also keeping his defensive prowess, making that Bucks team a very, respectable defensive-minded team. You got guys like him and Bobby Portis, Giannis, blocking shots, stifling shots. He's definitely an anchor for their defense. Even today at his old lumbering age, he makes guys think twice about going and trying him at the rim. So obviously, and he's averaged 16 points a game for his career, 6 rebounds, 1.4 assists, shooting 49.6% from the field. and about 35% from the 3-point line. And 79.6% from the free throw line. So do we feel that Brook Lopez is a Hall of Famer?
Pretty much the same. The only difference between him and Al Horford is he's got a ring. But everything I said about Al Horford, I could say about Brook Lopez. He did change with the times. He was an awesome, back to the basket big man when he had to do that, had to be that. Played with the Lakers. He was a good, solid big man, and he was that for many years, and then changed his game up to fit the new style of NBA, and I think he's added years to his career. Even with the championship, no, he's a one-time All-Star. I don't know how you can. I wouldn't even know how you would kind of twist it into giving him any kind of argument to be a Hall of Famer. Yeah, I mean, he was able to extend his career, and he's a great player because of that. Because anybody that can transition to a whole new style, they're great. But do you give them a Hall of Fame nod for that? No. Yeah, because if the Bucks had won 3 straight or something like that, yeah, I would probably, because he'd probably be one of their main people, their top defenders with Giannis and Portis, and like you said. But the fact that they're one and done and they've been struggling ever since, and without Giannis, he couldn't get it done at all. No.
Mm-mm. And then for me, so this is kind of rough, but I'm leaning more on your side with this one. I give him a higher chance than Al Horford, especially since he's a champion. If we're talking about my Hall of Fame, no, he doesn't make my Hall of Fame. He's not on the level of guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon. Like obviously those are like the greatest of greats, but even a Pau Gasol, I mean, he's just not on that level. Like in terms of production, I mean, yeah, you can make an argument that he could probably produce about the same as a Pau Gasol, but I think Pau Gasol's impact, like as a player, just put him heads and shoulders above a lot of the current NBA bigs we have today, just because of his passing ability. He was able to stretch out there, and he obviously he's one of those bigs that stretched his career out longer by increasing his range, right? And I just like Brook Lopez is good, but again, on defense, if he's not stifling your shot at the rim, you put him in isolation, it don't look too pretty. And I'm not going to hold that against him, because there's a lot of big men in the Hall of Fame that if you put them on an island with the guard, they're gonna have them doing the hokey pokey and turn yourself around. So I'm not gonna hold him with that, but I don't think he's a Hall of Famer because he just doesn't have the accolades. And even though I respect him changing up his game for his career to prolong it, that doesn't give him the Hall of Fame nod, in my opinion. And next, we have a very, very controversial player, a very well-loved player. We have Derrick Rose. And I'll go ahead and start with this one. This one's very hard for me. Looking back at Derrick Rose, I mean, especially when they started like going through and looking at the measurements and like heights, and we find out he's really like 6'2", doing the crazy stuff that he was doing. But we just take it back to 2011 real quick, man. We talk about the MVP year that he had. Like, even though I still believe LeBron James should have won that MVP, and I'm a big LeBron guy, I'm not mad that Derrick Rose won that MVP, because he was a nightmare for a lot of people in the league. And he had a span of like what, from like 09 or 2010 to about 2012, 2013, where he was just, you could argue he was one of the best. You could make an argument for each night that he was the best player in the game. Obviously I'm gonna say LeBron, but some nights he could go toe to toe with the likes of a LeBron in his prime, and that speaks to the greatness of Derrick Rose. But he was a 2011 MVP, 09 Rookie of the Year, and he played very, very well, especially against Rajon Rondo and that Boston Celtics team. He came on that playoff series and he owned it. Like he gave them fits with his speed, quickness, athleticism. He was on another level. He was a three-time All-Star. He's an All NBA first team in 2011, All Rookie first team in 2009. He won two World Cup gold medals in 2010 and 2014. It's really hard because it's like the tale of two halves, and you have the first half, the very, very dominant half,
Choose
just
wisely.
giving everybody fits. But if we are talking about the totality of the career, injuries are what's going to take him out of the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. And I don't want to say this. I genuinely do not want to say this, but he will not make the Hall of Fame. And if it was up to me, he would not make it because we can't just see 3 or 4 good years or 5 good years and then just dismiss the rest of your career because it doesn't work like that, right? But if we're talking about impact, Derrick Rose has had a lasting impact on basketball that almost like no other, right? At his size, his speed, his explosiveness, we haven't seen anybody else like that unless you want to throw in maybe a Westbrook-esque player. Maybe we seeing like some Ja Morant, like we're seeing some flashes, but they always compare those players to Derrick Rose. Um, I just don't think he has the accolades to put him in the Hall of Fame. Um, and obviously he doesn't have that much success. He's been hurt in the prime years. Those knee injuries, they hampered him. They stopped his first ballot Hall of Fame trajectory, and to me it just knocked him right on out. I mean, he just doesn't play at the same level. I will say he had a revamp in Minnesota where he dropped 50, and it was very emotional for definitely Derrick Rose fans, but Derrick Rose himself, because obviously he didn't look too good in Cleveland. He looked okay in New York. He had some rough stints in other places, but that Minnesota stint was very special. Now he's on the Grizzlies, doesn't really get much burn with that team. Even when they were like god awful, I think he was hurt or they just didn't play him. Whatever the case may be, I don't have Derrick Rose in my Hall of Fame, and it hurts my heart to say it, but them injuries just derailed his career, man.
But in that case, are you okay with Tracy McGrady being in the Basketball Hall of Fame?
McGrady is a tougher story because if I'm going to be consistent, that one's rough, man, because I think McGrady did it a little bit longer. And though he didn't have much playoff success either, and he had some playoff flameouts himself, I mean, if we're talking about my Hall of Fame, like NBA Hall of Fame is different than my Hall of Fame, but the NBA Hall of Fame, both of them probably make it. Like obviously I know T-Mac, whatever, but Derrick Rose, could he make it? Probably, but for me, I just don't think they had enough success. Like success is big to me. Like you can't be a top guy, and D Rose is different because that's injuries. But we can't also just evaluate him on the good years he had because that wouldn't be fair to the other players with a longer body of work who might maybe not have been as good as him, but had a full career to back up their resume for the Hall of Fame.
I get that, and the unfortunate thing for Derrick Rose was if he had come to like a Spurs, worked with a Chip England on his shot, and built a solid 3-point shot, his career would be a little different, I think, because he's not a shooter, and because of his injuries, he can't do the things that made him Derrick Rose, the MVP. So he's not able to. Yeah, he took a big hit when he had those injuries. But if you watch Derrick Rose during prime Derrick Rose, and he didn't even. The sad thing is he didn't really get into his full prime. He was unguardable. I saw him play against the San Antonio Spurs. I'm a Spurs fan. One of the top defenses in the NBA, number one team out west. Derrick Rose scored at will. I saw him against the Boston Celtics, like I said. One of the better defenses. Couldn't stop him. Got to the basket at will. He was like Russell Westbrook, prime Russell Westbrook times 10, and that was before he got into his true prime. Like he was like a 6'2" guard that was literally unguardable. I mean, we saw if you saw the 2012 when LeBron had to guard him, or 2011, whichever one.
Oh yeah,
LeBron did.
He had to guard him.
LeBron did lock him down. He did.
He did.
That's probably one of LeBron's best defensive games or series I've ever seen, because when he switched on to him, Derrick Rose was negated completely. But before that, nobody could stop him, and he was an MVP, multiple time All-Star. Unfortunately, only 3 times, which looks not that great when you consider he's still in the NBA. But this is 15-16 season. 3-time All-Star, and he hasn't really regained any of his past success. You can't judge on trajectory, because that's not fair. Because then you have to judge everybody. Brandon Roy and guys like that, you got to say, what you could have been is what I'm gonna judge you on. So if you can't do that with Derrick Rose, then sadly I have to agree that he's not an all-star. But he started off definitely not all-star. I mean, I keep saying all-star, but not Hall of Famer. But he definitely started his career off as definitely Hall of Famer at some point. But I mean, injuries are terrible, and that pretty much derailed his whole career. You can't give him the benefit of the doubt, unfortunately, because if you do that, you got to do that for everybody. So even being an MVP, I can't put him in the Hall of Fame. So I hate saying that, because he was a joy to watch for those about 4 years. He was just a man in Chicago, but yeah.
Unfortunately. Moving on to Kevin Love. Kevin Love, his resume speaks for himself. 5-time All-Star. Of course, that 2016 NBA champ. Of course, LeBron and Kyrie. Key stop against Steph Curry, by the way. Can't forget that. He was all-rookie in the 08-09 year. 2010-2011 rebounding champ. 2-time All-Star. He was the 2010-2011 Most Improved Player of the Year. Averaged 16.5 points for his career, 10 rebounds a game, 2.3 assists, shooting 44% from the field and about 37% from the three-point line for his career, 83% from the free throw line. It's Kevin Love we're talking about here. We want to talk about impact, we can go there. I mean, in terms of impact as a player, I mean, you look at his prime years in Minnesota, that man was unguardable. People used to think he was 6'10", doing what he was doing to these big guys. We find out this brother is 6'8", 6'9", or whatever you want to get. I think he's like
my height.
Yeah, maybe even shorter than that. He might be like 6'7", 6'6", whatever the case may be. Because seeing him next to LeBron, yeah, he definitely ain't no 6'10". I'll tell you that much. So just to see what he's been doing, especially in his prime, couldn't nobody have no answer for Kevin Love. His resume speaks for himself. He's one of the best shooting bigs to ever touch the game. Even though he's a shorter big, he could still post you up, face up game, back to the basket. He had everything, and you just could not guard him. The only, probably derailment of his career was he played in Minnesota for that long time, and they weren't doing much of anything. They didn't put, adequate pieces around him during his prime, so he had to eventually get traded out to Cleveland, where we saw on the biggest stage, he produced. Obviously he wasn't having the greatest shooting seasons or the best shooting games in some of those playoff games that he played on that title run, but he showed up in a big way. He anchored, not the defense, but the rebounds. Obviously he got that key stop on a MVP in Steph Curry, albeit whatever you want to say. You want to say he was terrible any other play before that, he shows you he can deliver at the biggest stage. He got a championship. Obviously, he could have probably got another one if Kelly Olynyk wasn't doing some UFC moves on him mid game,
Oh
and
wow.
that's gonna sting me to the day I stop watching
Wow.
basketball, because I promise you that year we ain't gonna get into it, but man, that would have been that year 2015
Yeah, I wasn't gonna win it.
we was gonna take them, but anyway, Kevin Love, man, for me he is a Hall of Famer, no doubt. I don't have any argument there. He checks all my boxes, impact, accolades. You know, just Kevin Love is to me a Hall of Famer. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, when you break it down, he meets the criteria. I mean, he's got a championship, he's got awards, he's got accolades. He was the man on the team. I mean, the thing I was going to say, his career kind of mirrored a little bit of Kevin Garnett from a Minnesota perspective. He don't have an MVP, but he was the man on the Minnesota Timberwolves.
He could have had an MVP. I'm just saying he was MVP caliber, and in some of those Minnesota years, I think he was MVP
I
caliber.
mean, he was a double
Machine.
master. He was. I mean, again, I'm a Spurs fan. Duncan had nothing for him at certain points. I mean, the guy would just shoot over him. The guy, he could out rebound him. He made Duncan look obsolete at certain points, which was I hate, because every time they played him, Kevin Love played like he was the greatest player in the NBA because he would just score at will, rebound at will, and they would like dominate. Even when the Spurs were like number one team out west, Minnesota had their number almost every time. So, yeah, I've got to give him his nod, and I think he's earned a Hall of Fame career. He's had a little issues as time has gone on. You could say he's not, his star hasn't shined as bright since leaving Minnesota. He had his time in Cleveland with LeBron, which was not the best, but he had to change his game up some. You could say the same about Chris Bosh. His game wasn't, spectacular like it was with Toronto, but you got to adjust to LeBron's game. We'll speak on that later. But with the totality of it, yes, he's a Hall of Famer in my book.
Okay. What about LaMarcus Aldridge? How are we feeling about LaMarcus Aldridge? LaMarcus Aldridge is a 7-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA. He was All-Rookie in the 06-07 season. He averaged 19 points a game, 8 rebounds a game, 49% from the field, 32% from the three-point line, 81% from the free throw line. Marcus Aldridge, all I can say, and I watched him. I definitely watched him in his prime years in Portland. That man was a bucket. That mid-range from the elbow area, cash money. Book it. You can go ahead and get back on defense, because that ball going up at that high release point that he shot with, it was great. I don't really, his defense to me wasn't all that impressive.
He wasn't a defender.
He wasn't much of a defender. He was tall. He was
slow,
standing at 6'11", but
he was slow.
He was very slow-footed and not a shot blocker, not very intimidating to go to the rim against. But that being said, again, one of the most prominent offensive figures at that size that we've ever seen. He did at sometimes stretch his range out to the three-point line, but he was definitely a mid-range assassin. So do we believe that LaMarcus Aldridge is a Hall of Famer?
I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to say because of this. He doesn't have a ring, multiple All-Stars, was the man on a small market team, Portland, came to the Spurs, tried to be the man, but Pop kind of tried to switch up his game a little bit, and it didn't quite pan out. But I'm going to say he is because of one reason. LaMarcus Aldridge's mid-range was nearly unguardable. And I think that's going to weigh in on voters. They're going to see that when he was in his prime, and his prime wasn't short, even with San Antonio, you couldn't guard his mid range. I mean, he could back you down. He could dribble twice, turn, and because you said he has that high release, most people guarding him couldn't block his shot, and it was almost automatic. So I think that the fact that he was such a efficient player, he was for the most part, and he was a player that had a move and had something that was just almost, if you show his highlights, he was almost unguardable, even though he was slow, super slow. I mean, Marcus Aldridge was almost slower than old Tim Duncan, which was crazy because old Tim Duncan was as slow as you can get, and LaMarcus was slower than him. So he wasn't much on the defensive end. You wasn't going to get too many dunks from him, but that mid range was just unguardable. And I think because of that, and because of his numbers in Portland, him being probably one of Portland's greatest players of all time, you could say, I think he'll get in. I think he will. He doesn't have what Kevin Love has, and some of these Kyle Lowry, these other guys that have rings. But I think just the fact that in his prime he was nearly unstoppable, he just couldn't get over the hump. He'll get in.
I disagree. I think that you're right about his impact, and obviously he had a mid-range shot that was pretty much unguardable unless he was just having an off night. That stint in San Antonio, I think that kind of hurt his career a little bit. I think those years of figuring it out in a Popovich system where Popovich is seen as this guru savant, basketball coach. If you can't succeed with Pop after doing what you did in Portland, I think that hurt his case a little bit. And then to even further it, what he did in Brooklyn, he didn't do anything.
In those years, he was a shell of himself.
But like they needed something, and he still had enough in his back pocket where he could have given them more. Now, obviously, I can't count too much because he had the heart issue, and then he fought back and got back into the league.
Yeah.
Played a little bit more, but then hung it up shortly after. I respect him for that as a competitor and as an athlete. Defying the odds like that, it's very respectable. But I just don't think he has the accolades to put him in Hall of Fame contention. He had a very good offensive game, but when you play one side of the ball and you're not at least getting a scoring title, get yourself in the MVP discussion. If you're going to be an offensive heavy player, you gotta give me more, especially more. I mean, 19 points a game ain't nothing to sneeze at by no stretch of the imagination, considering the era he played in. But let's not act like if you're an offensive player, you can't elevate yourself and your team to higher stature if you're not going to give us much of anything on the defensive end. That's my gripe with him.
I mean, that's fair. And he's one of those that I can see be on the cusp. He's, I think they'll give him the nod because of other players that have gotten in, but I can see them not because of the reasons you gave.
We just spoke about him at the beginning of the show. Mr. Draymond Green, Mr. RKO, Mr. Stomp Your Chest, Mr. Yell at the Ref, Mr. Choke him out. Where does the list end? Draymond Green, ladies and gentlemen. But all jokes aside, Draymond is a 4-time All-Star, a 4-time NBA champ, 8-time All-Defensive. He was a 2016-2017 Steel champ, which I think that was probably his best season. But that's neither here nor there. He was two-time All-NBA, and he was a 2016-2017 Defensive Player of the Year. Mr. Draymond Green averaged 8.7 points per game for his career in 813 games and counting, not counting the games he got suspended, by the way. He averaged 7 rebounds a game and 5.6 assists For his career, 45% field goal percentage, 31.9 3-point percentage, and 71.3 free throw percentage. So I'll go ahead and start with this one. I think they'll give him the nod as a Hall of Famer. NBA wise, of course, he's a champion, a 4-time champion. That you can't sneeze at 4 rings, even if you don't like him. As Charles Barkley called him, triple single. It's fun. It's fun in games to make fun of him, but when we talk about impact on the defensive end, because that's what you need to have if you're a player like Draymond Green, and you're not going to fill up the box, the points per game totals and everything like that. You're not going to have this sexy offensive game, which he had a pretty decent bag in college, which I'm surprised it didn't translate more into being more of at least a better scorer, like maybe the earlier years of Al Horford, like where he could get you like 15 to 17 points a game. I thought Draymond could always do that. Obviously, that wasn't his role, but even in the earlier years when it was Steph and Clay, I mean, there wasn't that much offensive creation outside of those two. He could have stepped in and he could have, easily scored 16 points a night. But
remember, they had Andrew Bogut down low.
Yeah, barbecue Bogut. Yeah,
that kind of it messed up the spacing for Draymond.
I mean, but he had the offensive capabilities to be a solid shooter, not a knockdown shooter, but a solid shooter and a solid scorer. But regardless of that, I think he will be in the Hall of Fame. He's the guy, again, we talk about impact, small ball center, the death lineup. When we talk about the Warriors, it does not exist without a guy like Draymond Green. His impact is felt. When he got kicked out of that finals game back in 2016, when the Cavs ultimately prevailed, him not being there is a very big reason of why the Warriors ultimately ended up losing. Now, obviously, injuries were a factor, but him losing his impact, you could feel it for the entire team. That's Hall of Fame level impact. Like, he anchors their defense all at a whopping 6'6", height, guarding bigs, making them look silly, right? Just because of his defensive IQ and his tenacity on that end. And then obviously he has the accolades to back it up. I mean, for God's sake, he has 4 rings, y'all. Like, at some point you have to give him his flowers. You can make fun of his points and everything, but at the end of the day, that man is a champion. He has the heart of a champion, and his impact shows on that team. That team does not go nowhere near as far. I'm not saying they don't ever win, because that would be kind of blasphemy with Steph doing the things that he does, but they are not the same team without Draymond Green.
You can definitely argue that. Pretty much mirror what you say. I mean, Draymond he's not the head of the snake, but he's their foundation, and he did a lot of things and because of how iconic that Golden State team is and will always be, we're going to talk about Golden State 7-3-9, whatever, for years to come. And he was a big major part of that. So he's going to get in based on that. That's, I mean, not even going any further, but his, defensive player of the year, any of that stuff, because of the team that he was a part of and just the history that they made, he's getting in. So without going any further, it's obvious he's going to get in.
We're going to wrap things up with the highest name on the block. Last man on the list, James Harden, my guy, the professional playoff choker. But before I get into that, let me go ahead and give y'all his accolades. He is a 10-time All-Star, a 3-time scoring champ, 2-time assist champ, 7-time All-NBA. He was the All-Rookie team in 2009, 2010. He was a Sixth Man of the Year 2011-2012 season. MVP 2017-28 MVP, and he was on the NBA 75th anniversary team, which that team was kind of fraudulent anyway, but whatever. For his career, because Dwight Howard's not on that team. That's fraudulent. Come on now. I mean, like they didn't miss certain players for politics.
Okay.
Howard was, that's a whole debate in itself.
That was a little blasphemous.
So for his career in 1,072 games, he averaged 24 points a game, 5.6 rebounds a game, 7.1 assists per game, shooting 44% from the field, 36% from the 3-point line, and of course, finally, 86.1% from the free throw line. Now, me saying all of that, you might be thinking, dang, how is James Harden not in the MVP? I mean, not, excuse me, in the Hall of Fame. And I'm gonna tell you
Don't
why.
go there. Don't go
I'm
there.
gonna tell you why. Listen, all right, we understand James Harden is all world in the regular season, but let's walk down to the playoffs. How many times have we seen this man James Harden fail on the big stage when the lights were the brightest? Right? You remember you're a Spurs fan, right? So you
Right?
remember that series when James Harden proceeds to just disappear?
Oh, I loved it.
Oh yeah, of course you loved it because you were a Spurs fan. And the Rockets, I'm pretty sure the Rockets were favored to beat y'all. Were they not?
Probably.
And for whatever reason, Harden just fades away. Okay. And you might be thinking, okay, one little small sample size. Okay, cool. I got you. I got you. All right. Let's go a little bit more recently then. All right. What happened in Philly? The Boston Flameout? How he goes in game one and drops 45? And then he drops he dropped like 12 or 7 the next game. Then he picks it back up and has a pretty good game three, lays an egg in game four, plays solid in game five and game six or whatever. I think that was even a 7-game series or 6-game series, whatever. Elimination game, turnover machine. You know, trying to ISO, trying to do too much, thinking he's Harden of old. But what I'm getting at, and we can even go look in Brooklyn. He plays good in the regular season. He's damn near an MVP candidate. What does he do in the postseason? Nothing. Right? Nothing.
Correct.
Then we get to this last season with the Clippers. I give him his flowers. He played a hell of a lot better in the postseason than he did in the previous postseason. But
Kawhi was out.
that does not matter if you are James Harden and you are everything that I just said you were. You give me in a pivotal game 5 against these Dallas Mavericks. You give me 7 points. Is that not good enough for you? Wait. Let me make it better for you. 7 points. You give me 1 or 7 from the 3-point line. You give me 2 or 12 from the field. You think that's nitpicking? Go back to last season in the elimination game. You gave me 9 points, Mr. James Harden. You shot 3 for 11, 1 for 5, right? Like these are numbers I am not making up. You had 5 turnovers in an elimination game, right? Like looking in the 2023 postseason again with the with Philadelphia 76ers, that game 2, you gave me 8 points. 3 of 13 shooting. Like we have seen Harden for too many times in his career just fade in the playoffs when you need him the most. I'm not going to say he chokes every single game, but when you need Harden the most, it doesn't matter what he does in the regular season because you know he's going to choke. And when we are talking about a Hall of Fame player of that caliber, I don't give a damn what you do in the regular season. You could average 100 points a game in the regular season. What are you doing? What are you doing when the lights are the brightest and everybody is looking for you? You are the 3-time scoring champion. You are the guy who almost revolutionized the game of basketball in terms of just your sheer offensive production, right?
I mean, there you go.
That's exactly right. But why can't you do this in the playoffs when everybody needs you to, when everybody is expecting you? They know you're coming and they know they can't stop you. But for some reason, you are just nowhere to be found. You're not aggressive. You're turnover prone. You want to ISO when the game doesn't call for it. And you throw your teammates out of rhythm because you are a ball hog. You are one of those ball hogs at a YMCA who breaking shots, not swinging the ball, not playing defense, and then complaining and saying it's your teammates' fault. James Harden is the exact player that I cannot stand. Right? Because he is a front runner. When they are up and everything is like, oh, it's just go turn up season. Y'all just wait to the playoffs. Then the playoffs come around and he is nowhere. I'm not buying the Hall of Fame stuff. Not if you're gonna fade like that in the postseason. I just can't give it to him. He's a phenomenal player, but Hall of Fame, my Hall of Fame, no chance, no chance. Not the way he chokes in the postseason on a consistent basis, no chance.
Well, I'm glad the Hall of Fame isn't based on your Hall of Fame because James Harden, what differentiates him from Steve Nash? Other than Steve Nash having one more MVP.
The playoff choking.
I mean, I don't recall Steve Nash going to the NBA Finals. I recall.
But wasn't Steve Nash the best player on his team? Harden wasn't the best player when they went to the finals. That was KD. That was Russ. He was a six man when they went to the finals.
I mean, yeah, but that was very early in his career.
But that's the point.
Are we going to base his postseason on just 2012 when he was, a baby?
But that's the year that you brought up that you said he went to the finals, and I gave
you
you.
Did it, but I'm just saying. I'm saying when did Steve Nash go to the finals? Did Steve Nash ever go to the finals? He's an MVP,
but
he's a great player
as the best player on your team, though.
But it don't matter. He was the best player on his team. Couldn't get him to the finals.
Neither could Harden.
So, exactly. So they're in the same spot.
And Harden was a better player, right?
They're in the same.
That's even worse.
There you go. He's a better player.
But that's even worse if you can't
revolutionize the game. He didn't. We can nitpick at all of this. We could say he didn't have a team to get to the next level, whereas Steve Nash had Stoudemire. He had, to a lesser extent, Boris Diaw. But
did you just say that James Harden did not have a team to go to the finals?
You're talking about the Houston Rockets.
Yes, when they were beating the Kevin Durant Golden State Warriors, and they
who did you have on that team other than Chris Paul?
They had a plethora of guys. Trevor Ariza, they had Capella, they had a full team.
Clint Capella was going to put them over the hump.
He was outplaying Andrew Bogut in that series. He was playing great.
So you put all of that on James Harden.
You can't put star players around Harden because he is the system, like he said. And he is a very ball dominant person.
Well,
that's why the team didn't end up working out. But that season, they had a great team. That team would have easily, if they would have got past Golden State, they would have won the chip. I'm sorry to say it against Cleveland, but they would have beat Cleveland.
Nah.
You tell me that team was a bunch of scrubs?
It wasn't a bunch of scrubs, but I don't think you can compare that to some of those Phoenix teams that Steve Nash was on.
They would have beat that Phoenix team to death. What?
Goodness, no.
Are you serious?
I'm positive.
That's a different conversation we got to have then, because that's crazy.
No,
you know how good that Houston team was?
You said how good that Houston Rockets team was?
Yes. That team almost beat the greatest team ever assembled. Not no 73-9. I'm talking about the team.
You're talking about Trevor Ariza. That was past his prime. Trevor Ariza, Clint Capella was still young.
They had a unit out there. What?
So who was going to go? And we're not even going to get into this, but who was going to guard Amari Stoudemire for that Phoenix team? Who was going to guard him?
No one's probably going to guard him. You can't guard him, and just like you can't guard Harden. But it's like,
but you have Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire.
Okay, you got two guys. They got Chris Paul and James Harden.
You got two wings. You got a big and a wing in Steve and Amari Stoudemire.
You could throw Ariza at him.
Chris Paul is an undersized guard. Anyway, what the point
Chris
of this
Paul
is
on Nash too, just like that.
But to bring this all together, James Harden is going to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't care what you say. He revolutionized the game. That's going to be his calling card to get into the Hall of Fame. Yes, he's not done well in the playoffs. Okay,
that don't mean nothing.
It means something. I mean, obviously, it don't mean nothing for Steve Nash. So, I mean, he got in. Why wouldn't you put James Harden in? They have a lot of parallels. I mean, they didn't play the same back then, but I mean,
you trying to say
James Harden was
Harden didn't get the same. You saying Nash didn't get the same experiences as Harden? Like Harden had so many chances on the big stage to deliver, and you telling me he came up short every time, and that we're not going to hold that against him?
We're not going to hold that. Why don't we hold that against Steve Nash? They
because
could
he didn't have
that Spurs team. They could be that they were a game away from beating that Spurs team, and they blew it.
I mean, yeah, they blew it, but it's not like we're not going to sit here and act like James Harden won, who we both agree is a way better player, right?
Yeah.
So you hold those better players to a higher standard. And Harden had
if you're going to do that, you got to be fair. I mean, you got to hold everybody to. Harden was Sean Marion. Isn't he in the Hall of Fame?
No, we're not here to talk about role players. We're talking about the MVP caliber players. But
why would you put a role player? Why would you put a role player in compared to an all-time great in James Harden? Why would you penalize him and let a role player get in just because they played well in their role? James Harden, when he's put in a role, has played well for the most part. Yes, he's had some trouble, but he's still James Harden. He's MVP, sixth man of the year. He's got the hardware to say, hey, I'm one of the greatest players of all time. I'm one of the greatest players that played in my era. He's been to a finals. I mean, albeit he was a sixth man as in that finals, but he's been to a final. Played well. He wasn't the reason they lost.
He didn't contribute enough for the reason to be why they won either.
I mean, did anybody else?
Yeah, KD did his thing. Russ had his moments.
Nah, I watched that one. No.
They were in a lot of those games with the Heat. They just got out executed.
And James Harden wasn't the huge issue. That's why he went to Houston and got that big old check.
I don't blame Harden for why they lost, but I'm saying once you gave him the keys to that offense.
I mean, he was a top member of a finals team. They didn't get it done. But he led those Houston teams. No, they didn't go far. They didn't get it done. But at the end of the day, there's no way you're going to deny James Harden getting into the Hall of Fame because, his step back, he kind of revolutionized that. His dribbling, of course, that's on the backs of AI and even Kyrie and stuff like that. But, I mean, you look at him, I watch AAU basketball almost every weekend. I'll be there in Atlanta tomorrow. And I watch them, and they play a very similar style to what James Harden plays. So I mean, he's done enough to I think he's going to get in the Hall of Fame just based on his game, his style, and some of his accolades. I get what you're saying. He's failed many times, and if I go back and look, Charles Barkley failed a lot. He's in the Hall of Fame. There's others that have not done well. I mean, Wilt Chamberlain, for as great as he was, failed a lot at getting. He got 2 rings, and that guy was a monster. But he probably got on in based on his stats and the things he did, his accolades, more than he did on his playoff success. So, I understand that should be a metric, but I think, in this case, you got to give James Harden a nod. He is a Hall of Famer.
Can't do it. But That's all the time we got here today, folks. I'm putting Harden in the Hall of Shame for his many playoff failures. But do you have any closing words to close out the show? Because I know we ran a little longer than we wanted to.
We didn't run a little late. We ran a lot, but good topic. I feel like we got our points across. Boston got the job done tonight, so 2-0 for them. So.
Oh dang! Well, yeah.
We're gonna finish watching these playoffs play out.
But all right, y'all, that's going to do it for us. Hope you like the video. Comment down below if you agree or disagree. Just have anything you want us to talk about in the future. Obviously, CW wrong. That's why he pointing at himself. But we're going to go ahead and get up out of here. Again, like, comment, subscribe. We really appreciate y'all running up the views for us. And y'all have a great and safe Memorial weekend. We're going to be out of here.
Everybody enjoy. Be back next week.